Imagine you're suffering from a life-threatening cough. Now, I want you to take the worst cough you've ever had and times it by 10. Then add blood spilling out of your mouth with every cough. You feel as though you're standing in the middle of Antarctica naked, but really you're sitting in front of a fire. Your chest feels like someone is constantly stepping on it, and you're 50 pounds lighter than you were the previous week. It sounds dramatic, but that's how bad tuberculosis was for the people in the 1790s to the 1890s in America's New England. More specifically, Connecticut, Vermont, Maine, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. The people didn't know what tuberculosis was, since they didn't have the proper science and medicine that we do now. Without the proper knowledge, superstitions were born. People didn't know what tuberculosis was. They had to fill the gaps in with something to give them that peace of mind. That something just had to be vampires, for some reason. The myth originated in Europe, more specifically from the Slavic people. The vampire myth traveled to America through the Slavic people who immigrated there. Of course, people love the gossip, so word got around, and they started making that connection between the vampire myth and the symptoms associated with this mystery disease, aka tuberculosis. The symptoms, coughing up blood, pale skin, lack of appetite, and chills are all the things that aligned with the vampire myth. Now, this myth is not an accurate representation for the vampires we see in media today. Think Edward from Twilight, Bram Stoker's Dracula, or any other popular vampire rendition. The vampires in these myths appeared more ghoulish or zombie-esque. So, the New England people were now convinced that they were under some sort of mass vampire attack. People were dying left and right. They eventually came to the conclusion that the vampires were recently deceased family members. It doesn't stop there, though. They believed that the recently deceased relative's spirit or soul sought vengeance on their alive family members by sucking the life force out of them from the afterlife. They had to find a solution to this, a way to stop people from dying. The relatives, as well as their neighbors, would gather together and dig their deceased family members' graves, evaluate the stage of decomposition, and use that to determine whether they were a vampire or not. They would refer to these endeavors as exhumations, which essentially means to dig up a corpse. Things like pale skin, noticeable blood, and long fingernails were the features that made the deceased a vampire. Once they found the vampire, they would, of course, exterminate it. Now, this part is kind of disgusting, but they would do a number of things. They would stake them through the heart, not just to stake the heart, but to also pin their bodies to the ground to prevent them from leaving the grave. In some cases, they would behead the body. Now, this method is kind of funny. You know how vampires are known to rise up or sit up in their graves with their arms crossed over their chests? Some people thought that if they just flip the body over with their faces down in the grave, then they can't rise up and out of the grave. Kind of like a turtle flipped on its shell. On a note not as funny, they would remove the heart from the corpse and then burn the heart. Sometimes they would take it a step further and inhale the smoke from the burning heart to cure themselves from the vampire curse. This to me sounds like some kind of weird, indirect cannibalism. The myth went on until the 19th century, when medicine and science finally advanced enough to completely debunk the vampire myth.